The last of the majority rule cabinet laid to rest. COVID cases continue to climb and police investigating the country's latest homicide. Good evening, everyone. I'm Leah Cooper with your JCN News for this Thursday, August 26. All the pomp and pageantry of a state funeral held for the late former Governor General, Deputy Prime Minister, Cabinet Minister, and Member of Parliament for the Anstown constituency, the Most Honorable Arthur Dion Hanna, affectionately known as AD Hanna. In keeping with strict COVID-19 protocols, a state funeral was held at the Christ Church Cathedral on George Street, followed by a private service at the St. Matthew's Cemetery. Mr. Hanna's final resting place. In a mass of thanksgiving at Christ Church, Mr. Hanna was hailed as a giant patriot. Paying tribute and reflecting on Mr. Hanna's life, Progressive Liberal Party leader Philip Davis described him as a great Bahamian, one who was compassionate and determined.
His love for the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, his passion for the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, and his loyalty to the Commonwealth of the Bahamas were unsurpassed. The finest demonstration of that love, that passion, that loyalty took place, I think, in the years leading up to independence, to the end of his earthly days. It was a matter of special pride for AD, a pride which, out of modesty, he seldom expressed publicly, that he had not only played a leading part in the struggle for independence, but that without his agitation in the ruling council of the government and governing party, independence would likely never have become a reality as early as it did. But he saw to it that it did.
Mr. Davis also remembered Mr. Hanna, whose political career spanned 66 years in all with the Progressive Liberal Party. Also remembered the former Governor General as a nation builder.
A.D. Hanna meant it when he talked about building the Bahamas with our own hands and with ourselves as the decision makers. He took no back talk from anyone when it came to that, least of all arrogant foreigners who thought presumptuously that they could dictate terms to what was still then a young, fledgling government made up of mostly young men in their 30s and early 40s like himself. He would go on in the ensuing decades to deepen and diversify his contributions to Bahamian nation building. However, there's no doubt in my mind that future generations will look back and hail his contributions to the attainment of national sovereignty and his policy of Bahamianization as the major reasons why he deserves to be held aloft for our collective praise and thanks as a true national hero.
Added tribute came from Prime Minister Dr. Hubert Minnis, who spoke to Mr. Hanna's humility and simplicity, one who was deeply immersed in the progressive traditions of his time. He described Mr. Hanna as a Bahamian giant, statesman, and fierce patriot, whom he says was a beloved founding father who left this nation more than just fulfilled because of his unrelenting devotion.
We are forever bound to the late Arthur Dion Hanna by ties of brotherhood and by shared lifeblood of citizenship, kith, and kinship. Our beloved former head of state constantly fought for opportunities for all Bahamians in every sector of our society. This fight for opportunity and equality continues in our generation, inspired by A.D. Hanna and others. Our greatest tribute to him is to pick up his baton and to continue the patriotic and civic endeavor of passing on to the next generation a more just, equal, and better country.
The Prime Minister adds that when the emergency phase of this pandemic ends, the country should have another national tribute to celebrate the life and extraordinary contributions of the Honorable A.D. Hanna. Mr. Hanna was the last surviving member of the first majority rule cabinet in 1967. Mr. Hanna died on August 3rd. He was 93 years old. Total COVID-19 infections in country now at 17,717 as the Ministry of Health on Thursday confirmed 102 cases following 376 tests completed on the same day. 87 new cases here in the capital, 5 cases on Grand Bahama, 5 on Long Island, 2 on Eleuthera, 2 on Andros, and 1 case on Bimini and Cat Key. 60 of those newly infected are females, 42 are males. Total active cases in country now at 2,819, 147 of them in hospital, 128 considered moderately ill, 19 are in intensive care. Of the 376 tests completed, 243 were negative results, 26 were repeat tests, and 5 results were inconclusive. The death toll is at 343, with 47 deaths under investigation. 630 people recovered from the virus on Tuesday. Abaco's curfew has been adjusted to accommodate those who want to take the COVID-19 vaccine. The Office of the Prime Minister releasing a statement last evening noting that the special provisions are being made to the daily 8 p.m. to 5 a.m. curfew as there is a high demand for the COVID-19 vaccine on that island. The adjustment comes to ensure that all residents who wish to receive the vaccine will have the opportunity to do so. In accordance with the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Management and Recovery Amendment Order, the following persons will be permitted to move about beyond 8 p.m. during the curfew: healthcare workers and volunteers involved in the administering of the COVID-19 vaccination, any person who can show evidence that he has an appointment to receive the vaccination after 8 p.m., or any person who can show evidence that they have just come from being vaccinated and is heading to their place of residence. For the avoidance of doubt, these provisions also apply to persons in line before 8 p.m. waiting to receive the vaccine. This was the case for Wednesday and today only. Residents are reminded that health protocols should be followed at all times, inclusive of mask wearing, physical distancing, and frequent hand washing. With elections set for September 16th, Bahamas Nurses Union President Amancio Williams says that a lot of things should have been considered in the middle of a pandemic, particularly healthcare workers being included in the advanced polls set for September 9th.
As a union, when we think about it, we have issues going to the polls. We don't want our workers not to be afforded the opportunity to go to the polls. So we know that on that time, that the nurse will be working, or the doctor will be working, or the maid will be working and taking care of COVID patients. Why didn't they design a poll just for us, for the essential workers at this time? Okay? These things that our Prime Minister and his committee didn't include us in. Okay? Because we don't want no nurse leaving from hub where she's working as on the ward with a patient to go to vote. So she should have had the opportunity.
Nurse Williams noted that the union penned a letter to be included in the advanced polls. Asked if she thinks the elections will add to the surge in COVID-19 cases, she says this.
It's going to add, because then here again, we're for nurses and doctors, we're there fighting COVID. So that time frame that you take away, we've already have a shortage of staff. So then we have to work around everything else and take into consideration, and if there's going to be a large gathering, how do we now combat this large gathering? How do we now carry out protocol? That is something that we have to embrace ourselves with. We then know that, hey, this weekend, the election run is going on. We have to now put in nurses versus police officer. You understand? So we need that hands-on. We don't have that right now. So all of that has to be in consideration because we don't want to lose any more.
According to the Parliamentary Registration Department, voters eligible to vote in the advanced polls include individuals with a disability, voters over the age of 65, a voter who's likely to be hospitalized or who's in a nursing home, a nominated candidate and their spouses, and election agents. The BNU chief is urging people to follow the COVID-19 guidelines during this time. You're watching JCN News. Stay with us.